wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Phil Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to preview the second game of the regular season Seahawks at 49ers on Sunday at 1:05 p.m. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game. 49ers were thought to be a team that was going to contend this year. It comes down to what to expect from their quarterback. We're not quite sure what that is, but they didn't look good in week one. So they're going to be looking for a bounce back. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and it was horrible weather there. I mean, essentially a monsoon in Chicago. And, the 49ers played okay in that game for a while and had some good things, but in the end, ultimately couldn't get the job done. A couple of things before we kind of get into the game stuff. Seahawks just announced today that Sean Alexander, running back for the Seattle Seahawks during their first Super Bowl run, will go into the Ring of Honor on October 16th when Seattle hosts Arizona. That's a great thing. We talked a little bit about the Ring of Honor, I think this last offseason in the summer, about who might end up there first. Sean Alexander is the guy. What do you think about that?
It's fitting. It's a long overdue. He should have been in a while ago, and I'm glad to see him finally get in. And then the next thing that I think of is, okay, well, where's Marshawn? Let's get Lynch in there as well, all those second Super Bowl kind of players should be coming up here one by one as time goes on. Seahawks made a signing, so a couple of moves really. Jamal Adams placed on injury reserve. He's out for the season. He's going to have quad reattachment surgery at some point to try to figure out what he's going to do there. He's still getting evaluations apparently to do that, but that move was made. Consequently, the Seahawks had an open spot on their roster and went out and signed cornerback / safety Teez Tabor off of the Falcons practice squad, originally a second round pick out of Florida in the 2017 draft from the Detroit Lions. Eventually was released in 2019 off of that roster, spent a little bit of time with the San Francisco 49ers on their practice squad. Most recently went through camp with the Atlanta Falcons and was on their practice squad. Seattle went out and signed him, so he is on the 53-man roster. Don't know what to make that move other than it's just another body, maybe some special teams stuff. Likely not to see the field for a while unless we run into more injuries. Yeah, I mean it's a depth move. You need a defensive back because you lost one, and that's all he is. He's a guy that probably won't be active this week, and if he is active, he's a special teams guy.
Yeah, and he ran a 4.6 240. So originally at Florida, he was actually really decent ball hawking kind of guy, had a lot of interceptions. I think 7 interceptions and 20 some odd pass breakups in the last couple of years at Florida. I expected to go in the first round, although he went to his combine, ran a 4.62, had some low overall athleticism scores and dropped him into the back end of the second round. But he's got good special teams qualities, some nickel coverage skills, just doesn't have that long speed to play on the outside. So we'll see what happens. All right. Weather could be a factor for the Sunday Seahawks game in Santa Clara. There's currently an 84% chance of rain on Sunday. So that's usually unlikely this time of the year over there. And in fact, they've got great weather before Sunday and great weather after Sunday. It just so happens that there's some sort of front moving in there quickly.
No, it's just it's going to be interesting. Like if they have another day where it's just pouring and the weather is just, they can't get their offense rolling because it's just soaked after the week they had in Chicago. Like
Yeah. Right.
That's just kind of entertaining.
Yeah. So I thought what we would do today is just kind of go through some of the different matchups today, some of the different position groups, what we're expecting, kind of go back and look at what San Francisco did in Chicago or didn't do, and what we can expect out of this game. So I kind of wanted to start right over with DK Metcalf against Shavarius Ward in their secondary. DK showed that he could battle for contested catches all over the field, had 7 targets, 7 receptions. They didn't go for a lot. He didn't have a lot of room to maneuver. Did have a forced fumble that came out of his hands at some point when he was fighting for extra yards. But what do you expect from not only DK Metcalf, but our receiving group against their secondary?
Well, I mean, the secondary is, kind of the weak part of San Francisco's defense, which, the whole defense is good. So saying it's the weakest part doesn't, mean that it's bad. But it is the weakest part. And you've got a guy like DK Metcalf who has the ability to take over games and dominate given decent quarterback play. And I expect more out of him in this game than we got out of him in the last one. I mean, 7 receptions on 7 targets is great, but how many yards was there, right? And so they were a lot of, a couple of them were catches behind the line of scrimmage, a couple of tackle at the moment he gets the ball. And I expect him to get free a little more, be able to do a little run more after the catch downfield and that kind of stuff in this game.
I'll be completely honest. That's probably kind of an unfair way to frame that question, really, because you do have to consider the pass rush of the San Francisco 49ers and the time and the timing that Geno Smith is going to have. I think that's all going to be kind of thrown off a little bit just because they're very good. You've got Nick Bosa, who's outstanding when he's healthy, and Samson Ebukam that plays the other side, more of a 5-tech guy, but he's good for 4 or 5 sacks himself, but a good edge setter and good run stopper. So it'll be very interesting to see Charles Cross and Abe Lucas in this game as well, and how that does affect the timing and so forth. I would love for Geno to have another one of those really in sync games where he goes out, lights it on fire, is 10 for 10 to start the game, and has a really good, nice, efficient game. I'm just not so sure. I mean,
especially if the weather is bad.
They've got a great defense. They just do. They disrupted, the kid from Chicago as well, Justin Fields. They had a couple of sacks. They had several hurries, a couple quarterback hits. We allowed a couple sacks and 4 quarterback hits from the Broncos. They have a similar sort of skill set surrounding the 49er defense as well. And so I expect some of the same. And so are we going to see Geno of the first half against the Broncos, or are we going to see Geno like he was in the second half where he was 6 of 10 for 35 yards?
Yeah. And 6 of 10 for 35 yards. That's 3.5 yards per pass attempt. That's genuinely terrible. Which is kind of what it felt like. But what's going to be interesting is nobody really knows what a team is going to do week 1 until week 1 happens. Now there's tape, right? And if you listen to Pete Carroll on the radio this week, they wanted that game. They were fired up for that game because it was Russ and because of all the crap that had been talked about, for the last few months. They didn't hold anything back. So that means that the 49ers have tape on what Seattle wants to do. Can the Seahawks still execute? That's going to be seen. I mean, like I said, coming out the first half of week 1 and doing great stuff is one thing, but now that there's tape, defenses will make adjustments. They know what your tendencies are. It's going to make it harder.
Yeah, and you kind of keyed into a topic that I thought we'd cover a little bit in this show, which kind of came under the category of things to watch, I guess, would be, is there an emotional letdown? You mentioned Pete Carroll really wanted that game. I think the team did too. They let everything go. Can they sustain that in a game on the road against a division rival
after the tape has been seen, everything's, planned and so forth. That'll be a big test for the coaching staff, I think, to get this team ready to play.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, there's a lot of reasons why week one is a thing. Like the Wilson and all of that stuff. Yeah, that's a huge thing. But just the fact that they get to go out, the starters get to play a full game. They get to hit someone other than their teammates. They get to play football at full speed and full contact for the first time. They're ready. I mean, everybody's ready to play. Just training camp and everything's just so long that they're ready to get out there for games. Okay, now they've done that. They've seen some guys get hurt. They've been sore on Tuesday and all of that. Like they're into the season grind. Can you get up and play at that same level? It's not easy. It really isn't.
The Seahawks have been able to get up to play the San Francisco 49ers. Seahawks have won 15 out of the last 17 matchups against the 49ers, going back to 2014 and 4 in a row. So there's some history on their side, but this is a completely different team, completely different roster. We are in a, if you want to call it a reset, it's a rebuild. You're looking for a franchise quarterback, but you're starting to build the roster, but it's a young roster. It's a fast roster. It's a great roster. But it's built with a lot of youth, especially in the trenches. And then you look at the back end on the defense. So I'm curious as to what position group or individual players that you are going to have your eye on that might be the keys to the game here in this this Sunday's matchup.
So I'm really going to be watching the outside linebackers. I know Nuaso had a fantastic game, was the NFC Player of the Week last week, but they also got gashed a little bit against the run. I mean, they were giving up 10 yards per play on average, and it was like 8 yards per run. They were having a hard time setting the edge, and guys were getting into the secondary. I want to see, Darrell Taylor be more disciplined against the run and not be getting himself out of position. I want to see, guys set an edge, force the run back inside where Barton and Brooks are there to make the play, and not make them chase a guy down, 10 yards downfield on the outside by the sideline. That's really what I'm kind of looking at with this team is there's a lot of talent. That outside linebacker group is good, but they are young and they're raw and they need time to learn. And I'm hoping to see significant improvement this week.
And they're going to be tested. I mean, this isn't an easy game. That assignment that you just are looking for is not going to be an easy one against this team, because you have two players that are uniquely talented in the NFL, in Deebo Samuel and then Trey Lance. Trey Lance is actually a very athletic quarterback for them. He's ready to run in the NFL more so than he is ready to pass. And they used his skills last week. I think he had 10 or 12 rushes for 50 plus
54 yards.
Yeah. And then you look at Deebo Samuel, he was utilized on 12 rushes, and it's hard. Well, 8 carries, 62 yards, 6.5 average, and a touchdown. But Trey Lance had 13 carries, 54 yards, and 4.2 average. So both those players present unique challenges to a defense as far as the discipline side of it is concerned. They showed that they were pretty undisciplined against the Denver Broncos on the edge and containing outside runs. They were getting pretty slashed. So it'll be very interesting to see if there's adjustments to be made against this team. The weather could be a factor. So we'll just have to wait and see. How about Trey Lance, the passer, against Seattle's secondary, Keith, and combining that with a pass rush that we might be able to generate?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle had a good pass rush against Denver, and that was great to see. They got, Wilson statistically had a good game, but you saw him frustrated at times. You saw him running for his life at times. You saw him taking a couple sacks when he didn't want to. I mean, no one ever wants to, but you know what I mean. And it's hard. It's a tough situation for for any quarterback when they're under pressure a lot. And Seattle has the ability to get after the quarterback. And the 49ers offensive line is decent if they've got some good players, but they've also, they're not world beaters on the offensive line. Seattle should be able to get some pressure.
Well, Trent Williams is probably the best linebacker or left tackle in the business, but
yeah,
beyond that, it's an okay but relatively average offensive line, I think.
Yeah. And so you're going to be able to get pressure. And if you get pressure on a young quarterback, whether they are, Trey Lance or a young Russell Wilson, like good things happen for your defense. And Trey Lance is a guy that he has some accuracy concerns, and he's not always, the best passer. He's more of a complete athlete and runner / passer than he is just a clean passer. So you get him where his footwork isn't right, or you get him throwing off platform. You can get him to give you opportunities to make some interceptions. The team just has to come down with them, because Seattle had 2 interceptions hit hit defensive backs in their hands last game and caught neither of them.
See, Chicago was able to generate a little bit of pass rush. They were able to get some pressures, some quarterback hits and hurries on Trey Lance, disrupt the timing and the potential to create mistakes and some turnovers. That could be a key factor in the game. Absolutely, for sure. Especially if the weather's a factor again. Last game, Trey Lance had 164 yards, 5.9 yards per attempt, and a 50.3 quarterback rating, plus an interception. So that could very well be a factor. Obviously, it's going to be a factor. Trey Lance is in his however many starts, third start overall in the NFL, and first time that he's had 2 starts in a row since 2019. So this is definitely a rookie. I mean, he's had 1 year under his belt in practices and so forth, but this is really it for him. He's out on the field for the very first time. He's seeing real-time defenses react and change things on him, and it's a different ballgame. One of the other factors that we might consider too is George Kittle. George Kittle hasn't practiced. He missed the first game of the season. He's got a groin. They're trying to keep, I think, this thing kind of quiet, but indication seems to me on a Thursday here before Sunday's matchup, and he's not practicing again today, that he may very well be out, which is a great thing for the Seahawks. I don't want to say it's great to be injured or anything like that, but he's last game out, he had 9 receptions for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. So he's definitely a weapon they'd like to take advantage of.
He's, if not the best tight end in the game, he's number 2, right? It all depends on where you put him and Kelsey. And him not being out there would be a big deal. It would definitely hamper their offense and help Seattle's defense, because that's a guy you don't have to account for on every single play. And so, yeah, I mean, it could be. One thing that I read was that they are hoping that he can play this week, and that they are, even though he's probably not going to practice all week, they are going to wait until Sunday morning to make that decision as far as whether he plays or not, because they'd like him to. But he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. That tends to tell me that he's probably not going to play. But we'll see. I mean, if he does go, then hopefully the Seahawks prepared for him.
So enough of the 49ers. I think no matter what the opponent is, every week we're going to reach a point in this show where we're going to talk about what we need to see out of our own team, regardless of the opponent. And so where do you want to start that conversation? What are you looking for specifically? 1 or 2 or 3 key things that need to happen in order for this team to have a chance to win.
Well, I'm going to see them continue to protect Geno Smith and give him that pocket. It's going to be hard with a guy like Nick Bosa out there, but I think that the combination of the tackles that the rookie tackles that played really well last week, and then Will Disley helping them out so you can double team Nick Bosa on every play, should be able to mitigate that problem. And then it's just a matter of everyone else holding up in that pass rush. If they can give Geno Smith a good pocket like they did last week, then that will greatly help. It'll make sure that Geno has time to survey the field, that he won't be turning the ball over and putting Seattle in a chance to win. So I think that's first. The second one for me is that they've got to get the run game going a little better. They only had 12 rush attempts in the last game. I would like to see that up over 20, because I think that when the Seahawks are running the ball, it gets the play action game, the bootleg game, and these are elements of the offense that will work better if Penny is making teams pay with runs up the middle and that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see that get going. And then, I need them to be able to stop this running game of the 49ers. The 49ers are they're very, very similar to Seattle in terms of the offense that they run. They do a lot of wide zone, a lot of quarterback movement, a lot of bootleg stuff, a lot of dragging guys across, the formation, and they do a lot of similar things. And you got to be able to stop the run, make them one-dimensional, make Trey Lance beat you. Don't let Deebo Samuel, but make Trey Lance do it, because he's not a guy that's shown that he can do it yet.
This will be a real test for Seattle's defense. We talked a little bit in the offseason about Seattle's ability to stop the run. We did a pretty good job last year, but I haven't seen the indications or time enough on the defense to know whether we're going to be a decent run stopping team or not. It wasn't pretty against Denver. Doesn't mean they can't fix it and get it together and be a little bit more stout. They do have the personnel, at least in the middle. I'm just not so sure on the outside edges. And with a guy like Taylor, and on the other side, Nuasu, it's just difficult to know if those guys are ready-made to stop the run on the edges or not. We're just gonna have to find out, because they're also being asked to drop back into coverage. So they're asking those players to read the offenses. You mentioned dragging on the offense as far as scheme is concerned, just throwing out disguises and so forth, getting the defenses to show their hand before the snap. And those reads need to come from those type of players. And, in the first game, it was a little challenging. So we'll see if they improve on that. You mentioned the idea of running the ball more. In order to be able to do that effectively and have more than 12 rushing attempts in this game, Seattle's going to have to sustain drives. They're going to have to convert third downs, sustain drives. I think they can run the ball effectively if they do that. I think they need to.
They were over 50% on third down.
They were. I'm going to ask you though, what do you think? That usually means they
will run it more. In this game, I think you have to. I think if you drop Geno Smith back to pass 40 times and you let Nick Bosa get that many opportunities, he's going to start getting through. He's just too good. And even, putting Disley there to help out, at some point, it's just too many opportunities. Eventually, he's going to get through. He's going to get sacks. He's going to kill some drives. You're better off making him run sideline to sideline, making him work harder, tiring him out, and not letting him do what he does best, which is get after a quarterback. And I think they have to run the ball in this game. And if you're over 50% third down conversions, why aren't you running the ball more? Right. That means the other thing is that the average yards to go on their conversions was 7.8, I think is what I saw. That's a lot of third and longs, and they still got to, just over 50%, but run better on first down, get yourself into third and short and not third and long all the time. So where you have an opportunity to, open up the playbook and you have a wider variety of plays available, make the defense defend more of the field, that kind of stuff.
Interesting. So I want to talk to you about one other thing before we wrap this thing up, and that's generating turnovers. How important that is to Pete Carroll's defense, and how uniquely positioned we might be to be able to do that. It starts with the pass rush and affecting timing, but it also comes with players like Quandre Diggs. He was in position to get another interception. You mentioned that. Jamal Adams was the other. Quandre's got to make that happen. Yeah, Quandre's got to make that happen. But Tariq Woolen seems really sticky and uniquely positioned to be able to affect balls, either batted balls, pass defensed, or interceptions. We've already talked about Kobe Bryant having the ball hawking ability. He hasn't shown it yet, but by all indications, during a lot of practices at the BMAC. He was in there and making plays. And then you've got Artie Burns, Sidney Jones. You've got a lot of ability. Can they do it?
Yeah, I think they can. I mean, it's a matter of part of it is, they've got to be in position, but part of it also is you need a quarterback to make a mistake. You need them to misfire a pass and put it where they can get the hands on it. They need, or just throw inaccurately or have one batted up in the air. Things have to happen, and the pass rush has to create that. And I think that when you're looking at, a veteran quarterback like Russell Wilson, who gets out of danger so often and has such a good deep ball and all those things, like, you're not going to get as many opportunities as you will with a young passer like Trey Lance. Now, at the same time, you can't take your eyes off Trey Lance, because if you do, he's going to pull the ball down and pick up 15 yards with his feet. So he's a dangerous player in terms of that, but you are going to have opportunities to intercept the ball. And when you do, you got to, if you get your hands on it, catch the dang thing.
Yeah. And physicality comes into play. I think we've got more physical players this year, both on the defensive backs, as well as players like Nuwasu and Jones. And Ryan Neal's going to be out there now more. He's going to be asked to do more. And then you've got guys like Al Woods and Shelby Harris, Quentin Jefferson are all good around the ball, getting their hands in there and punching out forced fumbles and so forth. So I would continue to look for that as well as being a factor, especially from Nuwasu. I think that was one of his specialties even before coming onto the Seahawks, and he's really good at that. Looks for opportunities there. Anything else you want to hit upon before we head out?
Well, we need predictions. We can't get out of our previous show without predictions.
I was trying, wasn't I?
You were. I know because you don't want, you're not ready to pick against Seattle this week again, are you, Bill?
Well, I am. At some point you got to look at the laws of averages, and you've got to look at how we really played against the Denver Broncos and look at the real roster of the San Francisco 49ers. I don't think the first game there in Chicago was a realistic depiction of where they're going to be at for the rest of the year. Trey Lance is the variable, and he'll probably be the variable in December when we play him again. But I think their roster is loaded. It's on their home field. Weather could be a factor. Maybe that makes it more neutral than normal. I predicted this loss in our prediction show, and it still lines that way for me, because to repeat that performance for Geno, taking the first half performance out of the Bronco game and having that same performance against the 49ers is difficult to do. It just is. Now, if it happens, it'll be great. And I'll be cheering this game on for sure. You and I are going to watch this game in person together. That's going to be awesome. But I think it's going to be a loss, and I want it to be competitive. So as long as it's competitive, we're getting good things out of the game. I think that's favorable for Seattle. I'd love the win, but I think it's going to be a loss. So I'm going to say 49ers 23, Seahawks 17.
So do you know that the 49ers opened at 10.5-point favorites over Seattle?
Yeah, it used to be like 6 or something early. And now it's gone up actually after this first week.
Yeah. When I say open, I mean, that's the, what it is on Tuesday morning, right? That's when all the games have been played. They reset all the lines. It was 10.5.
That's too high. That's a big spread. And considering the history of these two franchises in the last 7 years, 8 years, that's kind of ridiculous. Really, if you're honest, and that I get that, but I think that's not realistic. I would take that. I think.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that it moved fairly quickly to 9.5, and then now it's at 8.5. It keeps shifting Seattle's way, which tells me there's a lot more money on Seattle, that people are looking at that going, it's not, that number is too big. And so
especially if George Kittle is out, Deebo Samuel's a definite weapon. And I think the entire offense is going to run through Deebo Samuel on Sunday, especially since Elijah Mitchell was hurt and he's out like 8 weeks. it's the Deebo Samuel show. I mean, he's going to be their featured running back and receiver and jet sweep guy. Yeah, Ayuk was only targeted 2 times, which was kind of a mystery in their first game. I look for him to be more involved, but it's the Deebo Samuel show, especially if Kittle's out. If Kittle's there, I think the odds are, Seattle's going to have a hard time, but without him in there, and if they can focus and contain Deebo and you make Trey Lance throw and beat you with his arm, I like our chances, but I think we fall a little short.
Yeah.
How about you, Keith?
No, I'm with you on that. I think that I was looking at that when I saw that it opened at 10.5. I'm like, okay, I'm not someone who puts money on games. I don't have the disposable income to do that, but man, I would have taken that. That is too many points. So then it's not a college game. In a college game, 10.5, teams cover that all the time. In the NFL, no.
But even 10.5 in college, I mean, sometimes you could see that coming from like a UCLA versus Boise State game. I mean, this is a very lopsided. That's a very lopsided number coming out of the NFL.
Yeah, that's what I mean. In the NFL, like that's huge. That's a massive number. And I would have taken Seattle. I still would take Seattle to cover. I think that is, if we're going to do this against the spread, I'd take Seattle to cover because I think 8.5 is still too much. But I also agree. I think San Francisco wins this. I think that the Seahawks have a little bit of an emotional letdown. They come back to earth a little bit. They're more of what we expected them to be, more of what they were in the second half against Denver, and San Francisco ends up on top here.
What if we're wrong? If Seattle comes out and spanks the 49ers on their home field? We sack Trey Lance, 3 or 4 or 5 times. We create a turnover. Gino's really good again, and the offense kind of expands because now we're running the ball a little bit more. The defense, I already said, is playing really well. What if that happens? If that happens, Keith, and we're 2-0, and then we face Atlanta next week, I would have to reevaluate honestly where we're at, because that would just be something that is completely unexpected, and it would change the dynamic of how we look at wins this year. Like,
I don't know. If the Seahawks come out and win this game, and I'd love to see them come out and win this game. I'd love to see them come out and win every game. But if they come out and win this game, I'm probably going to pick against them against Atlanta. And the reason why I'll pick against them against Atlanta is because clearly I've picked against them twice and they've won, and I'm just going to keep riding that train until it crashes, right? Because I want to see wins. Just because I pick a loss doesn't mean I want to see a loss.
We don't pick losses very often, and when we do, we're trying to be as realistic as possible. I mean, we are kind of homeristic. It's true. We follow the team, and we're not beat writers. We're not, but at the same time, we are trying to be realistic and just really look at the matchups and stuff. And it does favor the 49ers. It's football. Anything can happen on Sundays. Seattle doesn't have a bad team. They're not like a bottom 3 team in the NFL. When you're a bottom 3 team, it's hard to have anything go right, and you see a lot of faults. Seattle doesn't have that roster. It's kind of at that next level. But when you're there, you can win unexpected games. You can outperform expectations, and I think that's where this team's at. And
just look at
if they continue to do that, though, at some point you have to say, I was wrong. They're clearly at a level beyond my expectations.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
I think that one of the things that you can see is there's a lot to like on the roster. I'm still not sold on Geno Smith doing thing, and one half of football is not going to sell me on anything.
Absolutely.
So I still think they're gonna have some weaknesses and they're gonna lose a bunch. But the rookie tackles played really well in week 1, right? The middle linebackers, which was a concern, played really well in week 1. The cornerbacks, which they're way down the depth chart in terms of who is actually on the field last week, did surprisingly well in week 1. And like Tariq Woolen's only going to get better.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bunch of stuff on the defense. How about the offense? I mean, we haven't really seen the wide receivers. Well, okay. We haven't really seen, though, the wide receivers have an effect. We haven't seen Ken Walker take the field yet.
And he's actually supposed to play this week. He's set to play.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's still some opportunity for improvement going forward. And it'd be interesting to see if it happens. I mean, if it happens, I'm throwing my hat in to Pete Carroll at Coach of the Year, just an early vote if they win this game, because he's going to be doing some miracles with this roster going forward if we can get Geno to play well and everything else kind of works. We mentioned the best case scenarios, in our prediction shows being kind of 7 wins or so forth. I still think that that's probably true, but man, early on you win 2 games you thought you were going to lose, and all of a sudden 7 wins looks attainable.
Looks like 9, possibly, right? You could definitely play yourself into a situation like that. I look at all of this, and honestly, if Pete Carroll can coach this team into, maybe they don't even have to make the playoffs. They just have to be in contention for the playoffs until the last few weeks and end up at 7 or 8 wins, but they were still being talked about in the playoff picture. That might be the best piece of coaching of Pete Carroll's tenure, because this is not a team that's built to win. And if they're still winning and they're winning enough games to be in there, he will deserve some Coach of the Year votes. Absolutely.
I agree. All right, let's get out of here. Everyone enjoy the game on Sunday, 1:05 p.m. against the 49ers. We'll be back next week, I think on Monday, probably, to recap this game and talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and all that good stuff. So find Keith on Twitter. You can find him at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You can find the show and the podcast and the YouTube variety of the show. And when you do, hit that subscribe button, please, and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.